The first vibration in my pocket was soft, almost timid, like it wasn't sure it wanted my attention. I pulled my phone out under the table, the clink of silverware and polite murmurs filling the space around me. One new message. From Mom. Do not eat. Just trust me. For a moment, I thought she was joking. Some weird diet tip or a bad attempt at a laugh. But then I looked up. Mom's eyes were locked on mine from across the long, glossy oak table. Her face didn't move, but her fingers tightened around her water glass until her knuckles went white. She shook her head, once barely noticeable, and set the glass down with care. I glanced at my plate. Roast chicken, buttered potatoes, a pale salad that wilted under the weight of dressing. The steam rising from the food suddenly felt wrong. Heavy. I pushed the plate a little farther away. It's strange, the little things you notice when your life has already been broken once. A tremor in someone's hand. A shift in tone. The way a room feels colder, even when the air isn't moving. Before last year, I might have ignored all of it. I would have smiled, eaten the dinner, and convinced myself everything was fine. But last year, I lost my baby. The doctors called it a late-term miscarriage, as if putting a label on it could make it clinical, safe, containable. It didn't. It happened in the middle of a Tuesday morning, in our bathroom, while my husband Daniel was at work. I remember the silence after the pain stopped. Not real silence. There was the hum of the fridge down the hall, the buzz of a fly hitting the window, but the silence inside me. The kind you can't explain. After that, people treated me like I was made of glass. Friends stopped calling. Daniel's family sent flowers but didn't visit. Daniel became polite, distant. As if grief had made us strangers sharing a house instead of a home. This dinner was the first time I'd seen most of his family in months. We were at his mother's place, a big, spotless colonial-style house that smelled faintly of lemon polish and some expensive candle she liked to keep burning. Margaret, my mother-in-law, had invited us under the pretense of a family get-together. She said it would be good for me to be around everyone again. The truth? Being around Margaret had always made me feel like I was on trial. She was a retired nurse, the kind who still wore her authority like a uniform. Even in her soft beige sweaters and pearls, she carried herself like she had a clipboard in her hands, ready to note your flaws. Every conversation with her had an undercurrent. A suggestion that I wasn't doing enough, being enough, producing enough. The afternoon had been fine on the surface. Polite hugs at the door. Small talk in the living room while Margaret's ex-nurse friends hovered in the kitchen, clinking wine glasses. Daniel sat beside me on the couch, his hand on his knee instead of mine. By the time we were called to dinner, I was already feeling that tight, breathless edge I got around his family. The table was long enough for 12, though only 9 seats were filled. Daniel and me, Margaret at the head, his sister Claire with her husband, a couple of Margaret's friends, and my mom, who'd been invited last minute, to make me feel more comfortable. Mom was the only reason I'd agreed to come. She'd been quiet all evening, smiling when spoken to, sipping her water. But I knew her smiles, the real ones, and the ones she wore like armor. Tonight it was armor. When the food was served, I remember the smell first. The chicken was rich with rosemary and garlic, the potatoes buttery and smooth. It should have made my stomach growl. Instead, something in me tensed. Then my phone buzzed. Mom's text. The stillness in her eyes. Her knuckles white around the glass. I didn't eat. I told myself it was just nerves. That Mom was overreacting. But under the table, my fingers were shaking against my phone. Everything okay? Daniel asked quietly, glancing at my untouched plate. Yeah, I lied. Just not very hungry. Margaret's eyes slid toward me then. Her smile small and precise, like she knew something I didn't. If I had eaten, maybe I wouldn't be telling this story. Maybe I would have gone home feeling worse than usual, dizzy, sick, and blamed it on stress. Maybe I wouldn't have uncovered what I did. But I didn't eat. And because of that, the next 6 months would become a war. The night of the dinner, I didn't sleep. Daniel fell asleep within minutes of getting home, his back to me, his breathing deep and even. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying my mom's expression over and over. That tightness in her jaw. The way she wouldn't touch her own food either. By morning, I couldn't take it. I called her. She didn't answer right away. When she finally picked up, her voice was flat. Jess, there's something I need to tell you. But I want you to listen all the way through before you say anything. That's how you know something is bad, when your mother has to set rules before speaking. She told me she'd arrived early to help Margaret set the table. While in the kitchen, she'd overheard Margaret talking to her friend, in the same calm, clinical tone she used for everything, about how I needed a dose of reality. At first, my mom thought it was just Margaret's usual judgment. But then she saw her friend pouring something from a small amber bottle into one of the serving bowls. Not much, just a dash, and only into the bowl that held the gravy. When I asked what it was, Mom said. She told me it was just a digestive aid. But she didn't put it in anyone else's food. The gravy had been ladled only onto my plate. My stomach clenched. You think she? Yes. Mom's voice didn't waver. I think she wanted you sick. Maybe not enough to put you in the hospital, but enough that you wouldn't want to come around anymore. The words sat in the air like something rotting. I'd always known Margaret didn't like me. But this? It was one thing to dislike your daughter-in-law. It was another to deliberately harm her. Over the next week, I started to notice patterns I'd brushed off before. How Daniel never took my side when Margaret made her jokes about my miscarriage, calling it nature's way, or telling me maybe I wasn't meant to be a mother yet. How he always seemed to know when I was working late, and how Margaret would conveniently drop by with homemade food on those nights, leaving it for me to reheat. And how, for months, I'd had unexplained bouts of nausea after those meals. I'd blamed stress, work, even myself. But what if it wasn't me? I wanted to tell Daniel what my mom had seen, but something stopped me. I could already hear his response. Jess, you're being dramatic. You're letting your mom put ideas in your head. She wouldn't do something like that. He'd choose her. He always did. So instead, I played along. I smiled when Margaret called. I accepted the dinner invitations. I kept every container she sent me in the fridge, and I didn't touch a single bite. And while she thought I was playing the polite daughter-in-law, I started my own quiet investigation. It began with a small digital recorder in my purse during dinners, then a discreet camera, hidden in a bookshelf in the dining room, the kind you could buy online for $50. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Proof of her slipping something into my food? Evidence of her talking about me? But I knew I'd feel it when I found it. The first few recordings were nothing but harmless chatter. But then one afternoon, when Daniel had gone to help his dad with yard work, I caught it. Margaret in the kitchen, speaking low to her friend. She's not cut out for him. Never was. A little setback might make her leave if she's smart. Her friend laughed. You and your little bottles. And then the sound of something being poured. That's when I knew. This wasn't paranoia. It was war. The more I listened to those recordings, the less I recognized my own life. It wasn't just what Margaret said. It was how casual she was about it. Like she was seasoning a roast, not deliberately hurting another human being. I kept the evidence on a hidden flash drive in my work bag, away from home. Not because I thought Daniel would snoop, but because if he found it, I wasn't sure what he'd do with it. The next dinner came 2 weeks later. Margaret made chicken piccata, Daniel's favorite. I watched her in the kitchen, her back to me, moving with that calm efficiency that fooled everyone else. Then she reached for a small bottle near the sink. Need any help? I asked, stepping in just close enough for her to know I was watching. She froze. Just for a second. Then her smile returned. No, dear. Just finishing the sauce. That night, I didn't touch the chicken. I pushed it around my plate, sipping water, pretending to be full. Margaret's smile tightened with every bite I didn't take. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. If I accused her without airtight proof, she'd flip it on me. She'd cry, Daniel would comfort her, and I'd be the ungrateful wife making trouble. So I decided to make her feel safe. Safer than ever. For the next month, I accepted every invitation, every food container she offered. I thanked her, complimented her cooking, even took seconds, though those seconds went straight into the trash at work. The friend who'd been in the kitchen that night? I made a point to chat with her more. People say the walls have ears, but sometimes ears have mouths. One afternoon, While Daniel was away on a business trip, I got the call I'd been waiting for. It was the friend. She sounded nervous. I shouldn't be telling you this, but Margaret's been talking. She says you've been looking pale lately, and she's sure you'll finally take the hint soon. I think you should be careful. That was it, the missing piece. Proof from someone in her circle. The next day, I visited a lawyer. Not to sue. Not yet. But to draft a legal document. One that would matter when the time came. In the meantime, I added one more tool to my quiet war. A small test kit I ordered online. One that could detect certain substances in food. The plan was simple. I'd let her serve me. I'd accept it with a smile. Then I'd slip the food into a sealed container, take it home, and test it. It didn't take long. Dinner the following Sunday, pasta with creamy mushroom sauce. The test strip turned dark within seconds. I stared at that tiny piece of plastic like it was a loaded gun. Because now, I had proof she wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. And if I played this right, she'd never see the ending coming. The strip in my hand was more than evidence. It was a clock starting to tick. Once I knew what Margaret was capable of, every shared meal, every family event, felt like sitting at a table with an armed stranger. I could have gone straight to the police. But that would have been my word and a little plastic strip against Margaret's perfectly ironed cardigans and Sunday school smile. No. If I moved too soon, she'd wriggle free. I needed to end her credibility. The first step was money. Margaret was careful, but not flawless. While Daniel was out, I combed through the office desk drawers. That's where I found it. A thick folder of estate documents from when Daniel's father passed away. Pages with Margaret's notes in the margins. And figures that didn't add up. I scanned every sheet, emailed it to myself, and put the folder back exactly as I found it. Next came the trap. Margaret loved control. She'd never miss a chance to twist a knife if she thought I was weak. So I gave her the perfect stage. I told her Daniel and I were hosting a family appreciation dinner at our house. Just our closest circle. I said, smiling. I'd love for you to make your chicken piccata. You know, Daniel's favorite. Her eyes lit up in that way only I seemed to notice. Not with warmth, but anticipation. The night of the dinner, I set the table with my hands steady and my heart pounding. I had invited not just Daniel's family, but also a local journalist friend, under the pretense of wanting her to meet Daniel for a story about his business. What Margaret didn't know was that the journalist had wired me with a small recorder. Margaret arrived early, dish in hand, apron still on. She hummed as she worked in my kitchen, the same calm efficiency as always. But this time, I watched every movement. When she reached for that same small bottle by the sink, I caught her wrist lightly. "What's that?" I asked. She blinked. "Just seasoning, dear." I smiled, not wide enough to show my teeth. "Why don't you add it right here? So everyone can see your special touch." She hesitated. The kind of hesitation that speaks louder than words. When the guests were seated and the plates served, I made my move. Before anyone took a bite, I stood up. "There's something I need to share," I said. I lifted my plate and set it on the coffee table where the journalist had set up her phone to take photos. Then I pulled out a sealed test kit from my pocket and, without breaking eye contact with Margaret, ran the swab through the sauce. The strip turned dark in front of a dozen pairs of eyes. Gasps. Chairs scraped. Margaret's face drained of color. I didn't accuse her, not directly. I just let the silence do its work. The journalist didn't stay silent. Her camera had caught everything, the hesitation, the bottle, the test strip. And she knew about the financial documents too. Within a week, the story was on the front page of the local paper. Nurse accused of tampering with food, facing financial misconduct claims. Daniel tried calling me, but I let the phone ring. Because by then, I wasn't living in our house anymore. I was free. And Margaret was exactly where she feared most. Under public suspicion, with no control over the narrative. Margaret didn't go quietly. She showed up on local radio, her voice shaking with rehearsed indignation. She called me unstable, hinted at grief warping my memory, painted herself as the loyal matriarch under attack. But the internet doesn't work the way she wanted it to. Once the article went live, comments began flooding in, from people I didn't know. I worked with Margaret at St. Helena's, One woman wrote. She bullied staff, and I swear she made my coworker sick on purpose after they reported her. Another comment came from a man in his 60s. She did something similar to my mother when my dad started dating again. We thought we imagined it. One by one, stories surfaced. Not just from our town, but from 2 other cities she'd lived in before marrying Daniel's father. The police contacted me formally. I gave them everything: the recordings, the test strips, the financial scans. I didn't have to embellish. The truth was heavy enough to sink her. By the time the court date came, Daniel's posture had changed. His suit still fit, but his shoulders sagged. He avoided looking at me in the hallway. When Margaret took the stand, she didn't meet my eyes either. She just stared at the judge, voice brittle as spun sugar. But lies crack under heat. The prosecution presented my evidence, then layered on the testimonies from others. By the end, Margaret was no longer a respected retired nurse. She was a pattern of harm in a cardigan. Her sentence wasn't long, 18 months. But it was enough. Enough for her to lose her license, her reputation, and the fragile image she'd built brick by brick. I didn't attend the sentencing. Instead, I drove to the small hill outside town, the one where I'd once stood after losing my baby, wondering if I could survive another day. This time, the wind was softer. I moved to a small coastal city a month later, got a job at a library. Nobody there knew my story. They just knew me as Jess, the woman who always remembered your favorite book series. And some nights, when the waves outside my window are just loud enough, I take out the little envelope I keep in my desk. Inside is the first test strip I ever used, the one that turned dark. It's not a trophy. It's a reminder. A reminder that survival isn't just about breathing. It's about taking back the air they tried to steal from you.